Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the VSI virtual pub with resident landlord Michael Caulfield. Tonight, we're going a little bit left field. We're having a conversation which will be a little bit different. It's the first time VSI have met Love Island. Celebrity Michael G from Love Island, amongst other places. He's going to be joining us in conversation. We've also got Brian Dean in the snug, who's going to be telling one or two stories around his playing career. So we're going to hand over to Tim. Tim will explain how you guys on the platform can ask one or two questions. Enjoy the evening, guys.
Cheers, Tony. So if you're watching this live on YouTube, the comments will not come through to us. The questions won't come through. They're not live. If you're lucky enough to be in the studio audience as an attendee, then you can ask questions. They'll pop up. Use the chat bottom at the bottom so that we can see everything coming through. And if any dodgy ones, send it through to me. And while she's going on, we'll ask a few questions if they're relevant as we're going through. If not, sit back, enjoy the show. And while I pass the hospital pass over to our public landlord, Michael Caulfield.
Good evening and welcome back to the Shankly Arms. I've got a special guest. We're not going left field, we're going left midfield because he's as fit as a racehorse. Good evening, Michael Griffiths. How are you, Michael?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Good. Where are you, by the way? Is that a London view in the background, or?
I mean, it's hardly a great London view, but it's a London view.
Good. And how's things back? If you're back home, how's the family back home, if I can ask?
Everyone's doing quite well. My mum and dad are kind of just self-quarantining themselves. My brother and my sister are both essential workers, so they're still working. My sister's a paramedic, my brother's a firefighter. So they're just doing their bit for the community, really.
How's your sister? Come on, let's. This is going to be the best pint we've had in here so far. How's your sister getting on? Because we're every Thursday we all go. I live in the middle of nowhere, Michael, but my little deserted road there's a farm at one end and a farm at the other end, and we all come out in our various guises and banging saucepans. How's your sister getting on? She's
she's very run down because obviously she's doing a lot of overtime, but she's kind of just getting on with it. She's got two kids, so my mum and dad are kind of looking after one of them, and then the other one looks after himself. Really, he's 21, so he kind of just looks after himself. But she's just trying to get as much rest as she can, trying to do a bit for the community, trying to just stay busy and keep at work, really.
Yeah. Mike, can I ask you, because I'm the landlord, so I can ask you anything. It's good to meet you. It's good to meet you in the Shankly Arms. We'll come on to him in a minute. You're 28. I'm not 28. What's it like going through this? Because I would still regard you as a very young man. What's it like going through this at 28? Because I've been through stuff, but I'm 58. But at 28, what are you making of what you see now and the reaction to people and just and you're the brother of a firefighter and a key worker. What do you make of it all at the minute?
Well, I was previously a firefighter myself, so I've been on the front line and I know kind of just how people can lose their heads during craziness, really. So this happening right now is a little bit surreal, really, but it's very real at the same time. Everyone's kind of taking their safety to the extremes, which is good because everyone's staying healthy, staying away from the more vulnerable people and trying to help the NHS in as many ways possible. Now, I do, like on my morning run, I do see a lot of people spending a lot of time in the parks. They are keeping their distance. So it's very understandable that people want to get out and enjoy the sun when it's sunny. But like trying to come back to utilizing the NHS's time, I think the more people that adhere to the protocols put in place, the faster that all this is kind of dealt with.
How are you keeping fit, if I can ask? Because fitness is a big part of your life.
I'm running like 3 or 4 times a week, doing me 5Ks, trying to improve on my time. And then I just train in the house, really, just home body weight exercises and just trying to keep moving because I've not stayed still for so long, for this period of time. Like,
how are you finding it? Because listen, we've been chatting earlier, and of course I know who you are, what you've been up to, because fitness is a big part of your life. How are you finding not just the solitude, but the fact you can't move, because that would tie you down a wee bit, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it's very difficult because I'd go and train whenever I felt any kind of way. Like if I was feeling a little bit stressed, I'd go to the gym. If I needed to just get up and move, it's easy to get out and get to the gym or go for a run. But now it's kind of limited, so I can move around in my living room, but it's not the same as actually getting out and releasing all my energy to some weights or getting a proper good running.
Has it changed you already then, this pandemic? Is it made you think about your life and all you've been up to and all you've achieved so far? And
yeah, I've kind of thought back at things a lot recently, just things that I've achieved in my life and places that I've been through sports and stuff like that. Like I've been to France playing basketball. I've been to Canada, played high levels of basketball myself, played high levels of football. So it just makes me think back to all those moments, and I just kind of appreciate the time that I did have that to do it.
And tell me, with that accent, big question, red or blue?
I'm a red through and through.
Is the whole family red through and through?
Yes, the whole family are reds.
No uncles and aunties who sneaked off to Goodison Park in between?
Actually, a few of my cousins are blues, but
that,
I have got a few friends who play for Everton or have played for Everton in the past. So,
okay, then Liverpool heroes growing up.
Liverpool heroes growing up. Do you know what? I was a massive fan of Emile Heskey, you know. Like, I was a massive fan of Steven Gerrard as well. Like, he's a baller. Like, there's nobody like him. He carried the team. So, like, that's what kind of leadership you need. But then now you've got the likes of Klopp, who leads from the front. And then you've got Mane and Salah, who are, like, just scoring left, right, and centre. So it's just, you got ballers like that just coming through the woodworks and just like propelling the team forwards. And then you got...
As a Liverpool fan, do you realise how good this is now, though? Do you appreciate it? Even we've had a break and everything, but because I've been watching Liverpool and football all my life, and I've not seen a Liverpool... I remember the last good team and the teams of the 70s and the 80s and the Shankly era, but
yeah,
this is ridiculous. Do you appreciate it? You just go, another win, another trophy, another win.
No, the way that our Liverpool team plays together, it's like they've all come through at the same time, and they're well gelled. Like, they all understand each other. They move the ball well. I mean, sometimes they don't like wake up in the second half. They kind of go to sleep a little bit. Like, if they go a goal up, they're just like, oh yeah, we'll rest a little bit, which I think they should just keep the foot down and go for it. But then the team's so well gelled that, like, you can see the camaraderie between them. Like, I love to see it because I get to watch it a lot. So I'm just like, they're the players that I get to see. And even when I meet some of the players, like, they're all really down to earth. They're all really sound, to be honest.
Yeah. And tell me about Jurgen Klopp, because you're in the Shankly Arms, named after the great man. My dog's through there, Shankly. So that's what he's named after. How come Klopp gets that city so because he gets Liverpool, doesn't he?
I think with Klopp, like, he believes in the team. Like, he wants to have a great team underneath him, and he wants to strive for greatness. And I think leading from the forefront is how he kind of proved it. So he rallies his team together, even when, like, they're having an off game or something like that. He'll kind of bring them all back and be like, look, this is what we need to do, and this is how we're going to do it. And the team respond to that, and they listen. And I think it's because there's a lot of young players there that they look up to, and they're like, you know what? This guy knows what he's talking about. He's taken us places that we've never really been before. So let's just listen and go with what he's saying. So he knows what he's talking about. So, like, even when you listen to him in some of his interviews, I'm sitting there and I'm just like, wow, we really just know what he's talking about.
And tell me, you said you were quite a good footballer. I've got to go back in time here.
Don't worry about it.
What was your dream to play for Liverpool growing up, and how close did you get?
So, being a young kid supporting Liverpool, my dream was obviously to play for Liverpool. Like, born and bred in Liverpool myself. So when I played football, I was always playing in Liverpool kits. And then even when it came to playing for our team, it was just like, I was a striker, and, like, I was a really good striker at that. So when I played, I got trials through from Liverpool and Everton. And my dad was kind of saying, you know what, just go to both and see how you get on, and you can kind of pick and choose from which one you want to go to there. But me, I was like, you know what, I'm Liverpool through and through, so I want to put all my energy into that. And I kind of got into the Liverpool Academy, but when I was at that time in my life, when I was playing, my brother started playing basketball, and I kind of started watching a lot more of it. And it was like, I kind of stopped playing football and started playing basketball. And I look back now and I think to myself, if I'd have just carried on playing football, I could have been a lot better and I would have been in a different place in life. But I never look back with any regret because the decisions I made, I've made some great friends who've played football in like Canada and stuff like that. And I know a lot of the players that play today, like one of my friends who did play for Everton now plays in China. So I've still got great friends from football. So I would never look back and be like, you know what?
What about basketball? Were you a big NBA fan? Were you a big American sports fan? Or did you do what I do and you just look up your older brother and go, I'll copy him? Did you find basketball as well? Or was it in the family?
With me finding basketball, it was kind of through my brother. Like he started playing and then he started showing me games. And I was like, you know what? That game is very fast paced. I feel like I can get involved in that. And then when I did, I fell in love with it instantly. I mean, from a young age, I used to play with a lot older players. So I was used to getting knocked about. And I think that helped me a lot because when I came to try out for the England squad, I kind of flew straight in and I was just like, this is great. Progressed through with England and then tried out for Great Britain. I played in Canada for a little bit. Basketball took me to France. It took me to Spain. It took me a few places in Europe, which I'd never really been to. So I was quite grateful for that. But basketball kind of taught me a lot more about teamwork because you're on a lot smaller team and it's very fast paced. So like my fitness just elevated to a next level when I was playing basketball. Like I could run flat out for 40 minutes.
Could football learn from basketball?
Sorry?
Could football learn from basketball?
I think football could learn from basketball just in the sense of like how quick the players move and everyone plays offense and defense. Like there's no like, oh, I'm a striker, so I'm only going to come back to about the half. Like everyone gets right back and it's everyone's right up. And the pace that you put in, the level of fitness that basketball players have is very high. And I know football players have great fitness themselves because obviously I've played and I train with footballers myself. So I just think the level of understanding, if footballers had the understanding of every position, they'd play the game a lot better.
And tell me, were you always super fit as a young boy? Did you like some of us?
No. Before I got into sports, I was quite a little chubby kid, to be fair. I think that's what got me into sport because being a little chubby kid, I was just like, I don't really want to be small and fat. And like, I kept grabbing my stomach as a kid. So it was when my dad got me into football and he was like, why don't you just play football? And my dad was like my biggest supporter, to be fair. And once I kind of shed that weight, it was like, I don't want to go back there. So the second I stopped playing football, started playing basketball, it was 100% effort every day, every training session, every game. Give it all you've got because you leave it all out on the court.
Did he get teased, as it were, for not being super fit and, as you said, a bit chubby? And
yeah, I think when you're younger, kids don't really understand the impact of like just words. So being a younger kid getting called fat and chubby and little fatty was just one of those things that plays on your mind. So when I kind of come away from it, that was always in the back of my mind when I was doing sports. So I was like, I need to be the fittest on the court or the fittest on the field. So I was constantly pushing myself. Like if somebody was working hard, I had to work harder than them.
And then, I mean this in the nicest possible way, Michael. Is fitness your, not addiction, but is it a thing that really stimulates you now, day in, day out? I know we're going through a wretched situation at the minute, but is that the thing you've really hung your life on, is physical fitness?
Yeah, I think from that point in my life, from when I was quite fat, the second fitness got hold of me, I never let it go because of how good it made me feel. So when I started getting fitter and I could run faster and longer and for further distance, it was just something that I could, even if I felt a little bit down, I'd go for a run or I'd go and train. Like even if it was an off day, I'd find some way of training. I'd do some sprints, I'd do some hill sprints. I'd just get on the field and do some ball drills. It was just a way of release, basically. So I kind of just clung to that and I never really looked back.
Has it had a good impact on your mental health as well?
I feel like it's had a great impact on my mental health because anytime I've kind of started feeling down on myself or I've doubted myself, I'd take a minute, I come away from it and I'll go and play some sports. I'll go and lift some weights and I'll spend a little bit of time there until my mind's clear. And then once that's done, I kind of think to myself, right, well, I was dwelling on that, but I don't really need to. I can take a step back and I can assess it and then I can approach that incident or that that subject with a clear head and I can overcome it.
Are you allowed to doubt yourself? You're 28. You're in the physical peak of your life. You're recognizable. You've been successful. You've probably earned some good, some good opportunities in the past. Are you allowed to doubt yourself, or do you have to show off this indestructible young man which you're meant to be?
I think you're allowed to doubt yourself. I would never say you're never allowed to doubt yourself, but when I doubt myself to myself, and I kind of keep it to myself. But as I've got older, I've kind of learned that if I talk a little bit about it to people who I trust, they can kind of help me overcome things in more ways than one. So obviously, being from a sport background, you gel really well with teams. So your teammates kind of become your family, and they're the closest people to you. Yeah, you all have a bit of banter in the dressing room and stuff, and everyone teases each other, and it's lighthearted. But when push comes to shove, they're the people that are there for you first.
Do you find that opening up and just being a little bit vulnerable to people in your close support network, even professionally, do you find that just as a young man, talking does you some good, just to talk through what might be just niggling at you like an injury?
I think if you're unsure about it, talk a little bit and get the feel out. Like, don't divulge everything. Just kind of give a little bit of a taster out, because that's the way I do it. If I feel something, I'll say a couple of words about it. And then if it's kind of caught on to, I'll be like, you know what? Yeah, I can talk to you about this. This is what's going on. This is how I feel. This is what I'm doing to kind of get over it. What do you think I could do different? Or how do you reckon you can help me?
Would you use, I'll be honest here, because you've got a huge social media following, would you use social media to help you in that, or would you keep away from it because you can get some nasty things said about you on social media as well? Or do you use it as a force for good?
I think I would try and use social media in the most positive way I can, but I would tend to steer away from social media if I was kind of feeling down, because the amount of negativity that's put out there on social media is ridiculous. Like, I get a mixture of positive messages and negative messages on a daily basis. So I tend to, if I'm feeling down, I'll come off social media for the day, focus on something else that can kind of clear my mind and move forward that way. If I've got friends around me, which I always usually have because I live with two of the lads, I'll turn to one of them and be like, look, do you want to go for a run? And then during that run, we can talk. So it's just a lot easier to do it that way because the amount of negativity on social media.
Michael, you seem a man of real positivity, and I've been fascinated all week at the prospect of Love Island meets VSI and elite sport. And by the way, you're very welcome anytime in our pub. And I've been sitting here thinking, wow, you're a motivational character who makes people feel good. You've got a great story to tell. You've come through and delivered a success in elite basketball, played a good level of football. And we at VSI love meeting people who come from outside of the traditional stereotypical box. So at the risk of embarrassing Tony, I'm going to say I'd love you to apply to come on our MSc program for sporting directors, because I think you've got something that you really can deliver back to the industry. So fascinating to meet you tonight. And Michael's highlighted some of the mental health issues around sport. I'm going to flip that on its head and ask the guys here, and I'm going to come to Brian as well. Sport's such a positive influence for people. In this environment, we're seeing the green shoots of the recovery of sport. I've just been listening to the news before I came on here, and I was excited thinking about the prospect of being able to walk up to the Etihad within the foreseeable future. Even the Moss Rose, home of Macclesfield Town, I saw people outside it this afternoon clearing the car parks. It felt like the world was ready to be rejuvenated. And so I'd ask Brian and Michael for their thoughts on what sport's going to bring back to our communities the moment it goes live again. What's it like to be a Scouser dreaming of the prospect of seeing Klopp and his boys lift the trophy?
Well, I'll tell you what I think, and then Michael and Brian can come in. I've said from the beginning of March and from the beginning of the pandemic, and I'm not embarrassed to say this, that although we had to do all the correct measures, which we must do, I think sport has been underrated, not just during this pandemic, but sport, whether you're playing in a village team, a club side, a national side, your local side, your mate side on a Sunday morning. That's just football. But from individual sports to gymnasiums, to dance, to walking, to park run, I think we've missed park run as much as anything. Sport is a force for good. It binds people together. In the main, it binds people together. It keeps you in the main outside, but even if you're inside doing sport, as Michael said earlier, you're moving, you're doing something, you're talking to someone else. Sport has been hugely underestimated in its aspect for promoting mental health. And the fact we've lost sport and we've lost exercise and we're somewhat rationed to how we take our exercise now, I think has been the biggest downside to this after the tragedy of what we've been through. Sport is a force for good, and I think it should be talked up rather than talked down. And it's got as big a right as anything now to come back stronger than ever. It really has, because don't tell me that, and I use it all the time, that what Liverpool achieved on the Jurgen Klopp the last 2 years has united part of the city, but everyone's got involved. The night they beat Barcelona was one of the most remarkable sporting occasions I've never been to, because I turned down a ticket because I thought the rubber was dead and I was in London. But when the whole of Anfield that night sang "You Never Walk Alone," then imagine that evening, it was one of the most remarkable things of human spirit I've ever seen in my entire life on a sports field. That was way above sport. And when England play in a World Cup,
Michael, is that the catalyst? Is that the sort of emotional push that we're all going to thrive on as we come out of this stronger for the dreadful experience?
I feel like the second that we come out of it, like that emotional push from sports, especially, it brings communities together.
Yeah.
So like, I think that's what everybody's missing. Like everyone is kind of self-isolating by like with their families or on their own. So the second they can get back to watching their sports, whether it's down the pub or at home, people have friends come round to watch the match. Like I know I've been to plenty of my friends and they've been like, yeah, let's go watch the match. So we'll just go down the pub or we'll just go watch it on the big screen in their house. And the conversations that flow during the match or even after the match and the energy levels is all lifted. Like you can feel it in the room.
Well, the thing that we've always spoken about here is that football isn't about just what goes on the pitch on a Saturday. It's the build-up during the week. It's the anticipation. It's the excitement. It's about walking out of your front door, getting on the bus, getting on the tram. In Tony's, in my case, going to the Etihad. My daughter wanted to go and just look at the Etihad the other day to make herself smile. Sorry, that alienates Liverpool fans here, but she did. And Brian, of course, has lived and breathed the Premiership era. So he scored, I'm sure we all know, and he hates me bringing it up again, but he scored the first goal ever in the Premier League. Brian, can you talk us through those first 3 or 5 minutes, was it? Come on, we want to know the story, and I want to know what it was like to stand and give 2 fingers to the Stretford end.
Oh, it wasn't at the Stretford end. It was at Bramall Lane. No, I mean, look, as a player, first of all, you know, you end the season, and when you finish the season, you've had enough of football, and you know, you think, right, I've had enough. I need a break. And you think, okay, we're back on the 4th of July, let's say, for example. And so you go away, you kind of like think, okay, well, I'm going to go away on holiday, I'm going to chill out a bit and whatever. And I guarantee you, like, after about 10 days, you're ready to go back. Because you kind of, it's all you know, it's what your body is used to. I mean, when I finished, I remember when I first didn't have to do a pre-season, my body was like, it was almost like my body was saying to me, what are you doing? You should be like running. You should be, you know, working out or whatever. So, you know, sport, but, you know, football is something that has always been sort of like central in my life and so on. And just listening to you guys talking about what it means to the community, I look at it now and I think what people don't realize is it's kind of like the cement of the fabric of society, really. You know, and I always say that when people have worked hard all week you know, and then you come to the weekend. That's the break, you know. They want something that defines their week. And that's what football does, you know, whether you're a Scouser, whether you're a fan down at Bramall Lane or whatever it is. It's like, this is what breaks their week up. This is what gives them a kind of, puts things in perspective and gives them building blocks. And I just take it away slightly in that when after I finished playing, I did a little bit of corporate work down at Bramall Lane, and I never really understood what it was like for fans, because I always used to take it for a little bit for granted that, you know, this is what I do, 21 years and so on and so on. And then I remember going home after a game, and it wasn't a particularly good game. And I was driving back up the M1, and I'd set off at sort of like maybe 11:30. And then I was going back home at maybe 6:30. I was thinking, that's my weekend done. And then I kind of thought, well, imagine what it's like for fans. You know, so now that fans haven't even got that release on top of everything else that's going on, it must be particularly hard. You know, we talk about footballers and, you know, being in lockdown. You know, it's, I tell you what it's like for a footballer now. You think about, if you've got a greyhound, right, and a greyhound lives in a pen 10 by 10, but can't go and run for 7 weeks. Can you imagine what it's going to be like for that dog when it gets out of that pen?
Yeah.
And that's how it is, if, you know, in the mind of a high, you know, high level athlete, is that's what their whole existence gets attuned to. So, I mean, yeah, so that I just wanted to share that with you. I mean, in terms of what it was like for me, you know, and scoring that first goal and all the rest of it, it's, you know, it was just part of what I was doing. And I think that, you know, I never really kind of, I never sort of like put an importance on it, because all I was doing was what I was doing. That was
Brian,
my job.
did you appreciate it at the time? Did you know what you were doing? Because we've got Mike, the other Michael, listening to you now, because sometimes life goes so quickly in your 20s. Yeah, Michael, it just flies by, and you barely get time. You barely get time to stop.
Yeah.
Did you appreciate it?
Michael, don't expect sympathy for Michael G on Love Island. Life just doesn't stop.
No, I didn't. I mean, I look, it happened, you know what I mean? And it was only when I finished playing, when people used to come up to me and say, "Oh, Brian, you know, you scored the first goal." I was like, "What's the big deal?" And then it kind of got, when you're not playing anymore, and all of a sudden, you know, people, you know, your yesterday's news, but then people start saying, "Well, you scored the first goal." I'm like, yeah. It was only then. And then I saw this, I remember I read an article in a paper, and it was the guy who scored the first goal in the Bundesliga died. And it was in one of the national papers. And I thought, wow. I said, it's almost like the same thing. I mean, some people think that football didn't exist before the Premier League started, but it's the kind of the change. And that's why it's different in many ways. But yeah, it's, look,
Michael, do you appreciate all that's happened to you? Because you've had a colourful life. You've become, you know, when I was told last week, we're speaking to Michael Griffiths, we know who you are. You've led a fantastic life. Some would be really unbelievably jealous of that, because more people apply to go to Love Island than they do to go to Oxford and Cambridge. Do you appreciate all that's happened to you?
Yeah, 100%. Like, the opportunities that I've been given just in my life alone, like, a lot of people strive for them. So I'm always grateful for the opportunities that I've had, like playing football at the level that I did, playing basketball at the level that I did, competing in men's competitions in weightlifting, like even things like that. Like, I'm totally grateful. Then coming off a massive show like Love Island, the opportunities that I've gained off the back of that is just, they're still coming now. So I'm really grateful for the opportunities that I've had. Like,
what happens next? What's the next chapter then? What could happen to you? Because I've learned one thing: you're competitive. I've learned that over the last half an hour or so. You like to, if you take something up, you're gonna do it well, aren't you?
100%. So I'm currently doing my own fitness business. So I'm just I want to perfect that before I launch it. And then going from there, like being the perfectionist that I am and the competitive mind that I am, I'm going to go back into competing just because like I enjoyed the rush of standing on stage. Like
as a weightlifter,
it just like you compete in your physique. So everyone's tops off and you diet down for 16 weeks and then everyone stands on stage and you compete and compare.
Can I stop you there? Can I stop you there, Michael? If you can see outside the little Shankly Arms now, beyond the blinds here, I live in the middle of nowhere in horse racing territory. And the reason I became a sports psychologist, and one or two of the people on this call have heard this before, was I work with jockeys. And I've got some stories of Aintree over the last 35 years, by the way, because I never missed a day at Aintree over a long time. But I've never seen, the reason I became a sports psychologist was jockeys and their weight loss, just their rapid loss of weight and how it affected their mood. Can I ask you how much do you tend to diet and want to remove in terms of coming up to a competition? I'm just intrigued now because that was my background.
So when I compete, I think the last time I competed, I started at 85 kilo and I stepped on stage at 76. So my diet process was long, like because I'm a personal trainer by trade as well. Like I take my nutrition quite far. So I would never do a crash diet. I would always plan it over a long period. So that's why I would do it over 16 weeks. And during my rebound, I would reverse diet. Instead of just going straight into eating pizza, I'd slowly up my calories again until I'm back at a point where I'm eating normally again. Because if you try and just start throwing pizza in, you're going to start making yourself feel sick because your body's not used to having those kind of foods in. And at the same time, when you haven't had those foods, your mind stops thinking about them. But when you get down to a low point in your diet, you do start thinking like, oh, why am I doing this to myself? What is the end goal? But if you've actually got an end goal and you can see it, you're just like, right, that's why I'm doing it. And that's what I'm focused on. Yes, there's going to be tough times during it, but the good outweighs the bad. And I have fun doing it.
Michael, let me just ask you, because I'm picking up on what Michael just said there. The mindset you got from being an athlete, right? Because that's been ingrained in your DNA from as long as you can remember. All of a sudden, you've gone into like the fitness industry and making your body look good, etc., etc. And then how do you go from that to Love Island? I mean, what happened? It literally clicked. Just how that meteoric fame, right? All of a sudden, is something that is a common thread, I think, between any of the footballers. I mean, Brian will probably agree as well. Being shocked when the complete change of the Premiership came in, and the way we portrayed the media was then a media sponsorship. How do you deal with it? Because you've had good press and negative press, and let's be honest, you had a bit of a slating unnecessarily, because it was portrayed that way for the TV and not anything else. So I thought it would be a good opportunity. Just talk us through that and what, like, the mental attitude you did.
So with negative press, I've always kind of taken it as I won't read it. Like a lot of people will send me stuff to be like, oh, have you seen this? And obviously if I don't see it, I won't read it. But if someone sends me, I'll actually go through it and read it. And I'll be like, right, okay, so you know a fraction of of me because you've seen maybe 10% of it on TV and you've seen what they want you to see. So I take that as you don't actually know who I am. You just know an image of me on TV. So the way I kind of handle it is I'll kind of remove myself away from any negativity and I'll just focus on all the positive aspects of it. Like being shot into I'll say, well, fame. It's quite a tough transition. Like you go from people in your area knowing you to the country knowing who you are, and everybody thinks they know your business. People try and tell you how to live your life. People tell you what you should do, what you should invest in, what charities you should give to. Like I give to the firefighter charity because I was a firefighter myself.
Did you enjoy it, Michael? Did you enjoy being recognised in the street?
I mean, there's always that. It's nice when people have something nice to say in the street. Like I don't mind stopping and talking to people, because if you've got something genuine to say, I'll stop and have a conversation 9 times out of 10. Unless I'm in a rush, I'll stop and talk. But then you'll get the odd person who just wants to have a go at you in the street, and it's just like I'm just gonna walk away from that. Like,
what about you, Brian? How did you manage that as a young man catapulted onto the kind of national stage?
think Michael's handled it the right way. You know, there's no point in reading negative press because you know, all it did was affect your performance. It's very difficult though, because you always want to know. You know, that curiosity gets a hold of you, but it doesn't do you any good. And I think towards the end of my career, I realised that it doesn't do me any good, so I just stopped reading it.
When was the first time you found yourself booed by your home fans?
Every week.
Let me think now. probably when I went to Leeds, and I was in my first year, and my first year wasn't going so well. Yeah, you know, it's one of them things in a game where you do something, you try and do it well, it doesn't come off. You try something for a second time, it doesn't go well. And then it happens a third time, doesn't happen. The fourth time, they're just, you know, so it is tough, and it's tough to manage at that particular time, you know, never mind afterwards when everybody's trying to summarize you and stuff. So it is difficult, but I mean, now it's on a different level. There's so much more scrutiny.
Do you think you'd handle it different, Brian, if the social media would have been about now, like that some of the, so for example, I mean, one of the guys that we know was playing in the Rugby World Cup, and because of something that happened in a scrum, I saw some of the messages that came through, and they were brutal, they were horrendous, they were about his family and all sorts of stuff. Do you think if social media had been about in your day, it would have had more of an impact? Because I'm thinking about some of the players that we know that play for England that have publicly said, you know, if I had that choice again, I probably wouldn't do that again because of the pressure that goes with it.
I think it's a society issue, and I think because what we're talking about now, like Michael, for example, he's grown up in that society, so we will have the coping mechanisms. Whereas, you know, if you go from 0 to 100 and have to deal with it, it's a different situation. But because you've been able to gradually deal with it, I think you know how to deal with it. You know, that the equivalent of that would have been in my day. You know, I remember one year when the first year that I was at Sheffield United, Harry Bassett decided to do his flops of that year, and he put me in after everything that I'd done for him in the paper. Now I had to deal with that on my own because you didn't have psychologists and all the rest of it then. That was a case of, right, okay, Brian, you've got to deal with it. And it's the same way, you know, but my coping mechanisms in those days were you'd get a bollocking at half time.
Yeah.
And the manager might say, right, okay, if you don't book up your ideas in the first 5-10 minutes, you're off.
Yeah.
So you had to manage that situation, and it's probably, you know, that you learn to cope as you evolve.
Yeah, it's interesting because in the media, we're just going on to about the media now, because there's one particular tabloid that has got a bee in the bonnet, and I won't mention it, around Michael and Liverpool and everything else like that. I just wondered, talking about coping mechanisms, Michael, how do you feel when that particular newspaper posts a story about you, and then clickily, if we go back then to what Brian just said about somebody sticking your name with flops in the paper, how did you feel about it at the time? Because it's unjust. You know, you had no control over that, yet you were thrown into it. But Michael, not mentioning the tabloid itself, clearly, you know, how do you feel about it?
Well, I think we all know what tabloid it is. Obviously, it's not a very nice thing because the things they usually put in about me most of the time they're not true. They've just kind of gained a story from somewhere that they've heard down the line and they've just ran with it. A lot of the times they kind of say that they're quoting me, and I've never ever done an interview with them. So for them to say that, it's kind of like, I get a lot of backlash from my city, especially when things like that come out, because people are like, oh, you're doing interviews with them, and it's like, I've never done one. So to have people from my own city say, oh, why are you doing this? It kind of, I feel that impact, because I'm just like, well, am I letting my city down? Because, and I don't want to. Like, I'm Liverpool through and through. I love my city.
So it's more down to loyalty that you feel that obliged not to do anything with that tabloid, or is it just?
Not necessarily just the loyalty. It's just like the kind of impact that it had on our city as a whole. Like, we felt that. So it's just like, I would never do that anyway. And there's still things that kind of come out to this day that's just like, yeah, do you know what? No one buys it in Liverpool. It's not sold in Liverpool.
Well, it's a bit of a joke, in it, but I know we'll often joke about it before. But Brian, if that you had that done to you, how did you cope with that at that particular point? Because you didn't have any media training, you were just kind of thrown into it. You deal with that, Sunshine. You know, like man up. Here's some man juice.
Are we talking about criticism?
Yeah, but you just said that you were putting the media in the paper by one of the managers without your permission and without anything else, just reading about it. How did you cope with that? I mean, that's just not putting you in the public eye. That's just like slating your public.
Yeah, well, you just, people don't realize, we talk about mental health now. The only reason why it comes to the forefront now is because, people who have suffered it have been brave enough to come out and talk about it. But, not everybody is resilient and has that mental toughness to come through it. I was fortunate because in many ways I had to cope with a lot of things to get on my journey. So, there was some, I don't know, maybe I was just thick, I didn't understand, but it is tough. And, you do get a raw deal. I remember, if I got time to tell you, I remember a time when, I just scored a couple of goals and it was on telly on Sky when I was down at Leicester. And a comment that the commentator made, even though I'd scored these goals, it just threw me. And you kind of think, well, where did that come from? Where's the criticism come from for that? And it's very tough to deal with, because after that, you question yourself. Yeah. And I'm sure that, Michael's been in situations where, people have said things about him. And even though he knows himself, you end up questioning yourself, because you think, well, what perception, is that what people think of me? Yeah.
That's a good one. I mean, Michael, you're actually an advocate of an advocate and ambassador for mental health, and I know it's really close to your heart. I know it's something that we've discussed, and the feeling of particularly in mental health in men. Whether it be footballers, athletes, but in men in general. And Brian just brought that nicely to that hill just before we hit last couple of questions. Do you want to briefly give us an overview of how passionate you are? How come you came to that conclusion about this? And what is it, you kind of give us a vision. What do you want to do?
Well, with me growing up, I kind of grew up in kind of like a rough upbringing, in a sense of not family, but just area. So I was always subject to kind of remarks from like other kids and other people I didn't even know, like adults and stuff like that as a kid. So I started thinking to myself, like, is that how people perceive me? Am I just this image that people keep telling me I am? Which kind of in a way pushed me to strive for more. But looking back at it, like, it was kind of just the implications that were put on myself that would make me second guess myself. So when I joined the fire service, we did a lot to do with mental health, and it kind of helped me understand more that, yeah, a lot of men do suffer with it, but nobody really talks about it, because we're supposed to have this big alpha male kind of outlook on life and nothing can affect us. But in reality, a lot of it does affect us, and not a lot of people do speak about it. There's some people that are brave enough to come up and speak about it, but many just suffer in silence. And I feel like with the right kind of avenues put in place, like a kind of a safe place, a lot more men would come forward and be like, you know what, I am struggling a little bit. Like, is there anywhere I can go to kind of get some help, and maybe someone I can talk to, maybe even someone I can just go on a run with and just like talk that way? Because I know I wouldn't really want to sit in a room and just speak. Like, if I go for a run, I'll happily talk. But if I have to sit down, then I probably wouldn't want to talk about it.
Michael, this might amaze you.
Guys, can I tell you a situation where it's changed, where in terms of dealing with mental health issues, where it's changed, and I'll names and everything excluded, but back in the day, there was, I remember hearing a story about somebody who, they actually introduced a club introduced him to a psychologist, because he wasn't actually performing to what they wanted, and they did that because it was like a get out for the manager. So if he, they could always turn around and say, well, he's seeing a shrink. You get what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's how it's changed now. So
In a derogatory way, Brian.
sorry.
Were they doing that in a kind of negative way? So that
So they were saying, well,
Brian, they were covering the backsides.
Yeah, basically they were saying, well, you know, it was a mistake this, and you know, he's seen a shrink. So look, can we get rid of him? And that's one person's, instead of having a duty of care, you're talking about being in a situation where they wanted to throw that person under the bus.
Yeah.
I mean, fortunately, he came through it, but he found out years later. But it's still not, when you think about the industry and you think about sport and individuals who think, well, they don't want anything on them. That's what we used to have to deal with, and I'm glad that things have changed.
Do you think on a more positive note, Brian, that the mental health of the nation will be uplifted by the return of playing sport, being able to go out and play golf, play cricket, watch football on a Saturday or Sunday?
Just go
that contribute to the uplifting of the nation's spirits?
Yeah, I mean, it's so. Listen, it is so important. I mean, we have these political arguments about when we're starting. It's about, I mean, human beings are meant to coexist, and this is what I'm saying. The football community is so central to the whole country. I mean, there isn't another country in the world where you have 92 professional football teams, and I think people forget that the football clubs are there as a pillar of the community. You know, that's what football is all about. You know.
But just on that point as well, Andy, and I'll go back to Michael and his fitness here now. It gives people a goal in life. As Michael said there, when he wants to talk about his mental health, he goes for a run with someone. I mean, this is, I'll begin to wind this down now because it's chucking out time here in the Shankly Arms. But my old dog is 14 now, and he's coming to the end of his walking days. I've had a text message through this evening because I'm doing a work with a sports team tomorrow. And the text message said, please just give us some Shankly talk. And because my dog's called Shankly, and that dog and I have done 30,000 miles, and I've had football managers, athletes, boxers, golfers, doctors, Strictly Come Dancing contestants. And 9 times out of 10, I spent £50,000 on my education. You should have just got a dog. Because it was, when people come for a dog walk, you're not face to face with them, you're not on the screen. There's no desk, there's no come into my office, you're not just seeing a shrink. If there's one phrase I hate, Brian, it's I've been to see a shrink. I mean, it just breaks my heart. And there was a really good piece this week written by the psychologist of Blackburn Rovers. Tony might know him, I think it's Dr. Andy Hill. And he said, you don't ever say, I've been to see an S&C coach, or I've been to see a nutritionist, or I've been to see a physio. You just say, I went to the physio earlier. But you still say, I've been to see a psychologist. And it's just this wretched, hopeless stigma. And listen, before I give up this job as a sports psychologist, when my old dog goes, I'm in big trouble. Because I've tried to destigmatize sports psychology in my own little way to try and normalize it. And if Michael Griffiths asked me to go for a run with him, I wouldn't keep up. But I'd go with him because that's why I'd find out. You tell me more, Michael, on that dog walk or that run in the park in Islington. You wouldn't tell me sat in my office because it's just it's not right for you. And I've learned that it's just a
great psychologist.
I've always said you can go back further than that. You can go to Herbert Chapman at Huddersfield and Arsenal. You can go Sir Ralph Ramsey. The reason I called my dog Shankly is I just qualified as a psychologist when I got my dog. And I thought, who was the greatest psychologist? And it was Bill Shankly. And
I listened to his speech of the night on your recommendation from Liverpool Town Hall. There must have been 100,000 people in front of him, where he declared the players to be subordinate to the Liverpool fans. They're simply servants of the fans
of the city.
Extraordinary leadership speech, which is what the VSI is in the business in.
Yeah, I based a lot of my work on Shankly. I still do.
And great leaders must surely be part and parcel of lifting their teams, their fans, the nation spirits, be it any of the European leaders, Boris Johnson in our case. Is he going to be instrumental in the way that Bill Shankly was, or in the way that Churchill was, of delivering the sort of oratory that lifted people out?
With respect, I'd love to see Jurgen Klopp do a 5 p.m. media briefing about this, because I'd listen. I promise you, I'd listen more to Jurgen Klopp
I would,
than
Michael.
I would to a civil servant.
I'd listen to Pep more, but
You would, because you're just obsessed with that.
Let's just ask this last question, and before you start wrapping things up, because James put this on here, and it'd be rude not to ask a question. So it says, if we don't resume the current football season right now this year, okay, what does it mean practically for the players and the motivation in careers, etc.? Okay, but there's a second part to it aimed specifically at Michael, which I'm going to ask first. As a fan, Mike, do you think Liverpool will still win the league?
Of course, I still think Liverpool will win the league. I mean, we're 27 points clear, so
beware of Pep.
But it's null and void now, right? You know what I mean?
It's ours.
Maybe you'll have to start again next year. It's an interesting one. But going back to what does it practically mean for the players and stuff like that, I don't know who's more qualified to answer that, Tony or Brian. But that's a particularly interesting question. But going back to your point before, Michael, and psychology was first used earlier than that. It was about the 1950s. Not a lot of people know that the psychology was introduced with the Brazilians first. They brought it through. They had a doctor of psychology with them as they progressed when they won the first World Cup. And I think it goes back to Pushka era and stuff like that. It actually goes that far back.
Okay, Tim, before we go back to Tony to finish up, what's a better job title than sports psychologist? What could you call yourself?
What do I call myself?
What would you if you could start again, because there is that. Let's not jump about here. It's just the word. It's the very word, isn't it?
Most of the guys either call me doc or prof or whatever that is, whatever that is, or a coach, just a coach. That's probably the way I would describe it. Because as soon as you mention psychologist, they think you're going to ask them to lie down on a chair and tell you all about the childhood, right? That's not what we do. I'm a practical psychologist. If you've seen Tony Robbins and various other things like that, I use every angle, every tool in my book to get people to get to where they need to go in the shortest period of time. So psychiatry kind of picks them up and stuff like that. That's not my way. I want to be able to teach you the tools to be able to do this yourself, so that I make myself redundant. So that, I think that makes me a practical psychologist. So using the word, as soon as you mention psychologist, psychiatrist, anything like that, people go, particularly on the dating scene, when you start talking to people about it, as soon as you mention the psychologist, they do a runner normally. Thinking about where we are and the kudos that we try to portray, there's a lot of damage being done by people that have got a qualification or represented sports psychology and gone into clubs and compared and done such a bad job that people now, particularly in football, think about, as soon as you mention sports psychologist, they go, oh, it's not another one, here we go again. And I can understand why. You have to build that reputation and trying to change that. And it's been a long-standing process of 25, 30 years building up a reputation. And even now, when you mention sports psychology, it's just about coming into the era. We're just about accepting it in that particular arena in football.
Well, listen, thank you very much indeed. Michael in Islington, thank you it's lovely to meet you.
Lovely to meet you.
I'll be looking forward to it. And listen, thank you for sharing the stories, the history, the background, and your love of Bill Shankly. That just works for me. It was great to meet you, Brian. I'll see you next week as well, Brian.
So yeah, you will. Nice.
I hope that cold gets better up there in Harrogate, and you look after yourself.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll do my best.
Thanks, and I'll hand you back to Tony to say goodnight. Look at that. There's a miserable Man City fan. Look, sat there with his Peter.
He's not miserable. That's him with a cheery face.
Tony.
Just to put a little bit of reality on the conversation we're talking about here with psychologists and so on. Another way we could look at it is we're in a pub, so let's speak honestly. What a load of crap. A psychologist is a psychologist. Right? And let's stop all feeling
as ever, you're barred from the Shankly Arms.
Let's all stop feeling sensitive to ourselves and being over special. If you go and see a psychologist, great. You're improving yourself. Over in America, you're applauded if you go and see a psychologist. So to be honest, guys, just my personal opinion, pub language, I think it's a load of bollocks. If you need to go and see a psychologist, go and see a psychologist and get on with it. It will make you better. And on that note, I'm going to hand it over to Andy, because Andy's going to explain who's on next week.
You are.
We've got an Italian legend next week, Fabrizio Ravanelli, who's going to be interviewed by one of our own cohort from the MSc, the VSI MSc. And he's going to be talking to Fabrizio about how he was really one of the first wave of genuine superstars to hit the Premier League. He came here for £7 million from Juventus, and in his first game against Liverpool for Middlesbrough at Middlesbrough, he scored a hat-trick. The game ended 3-3, which has probably encapsulated his experience in England, because Middlesbrough got relegated that season, played in a cup final. He's played for Lazio, he's played for Juventus, he's won the Champions League. He was in that first wave of superstars that came to this country and re-educated us, he would argue, on how we ate, how we slept, how we worked. So he's going to be there in the pub. His preferred tipple is a glass of Barolo. Warm beer is not his cup of tea, but he does promise to set the sparks fly when he gives his opinion on England, on football, and why the Premier League is the best league in the world.
Lovely.
Can you remember his nickname?
Yeah. The White
Can
Feather.
you remember his nickname?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Sadly, Brian, I'm of a similar age to you.
I nicked his celebration a couple of times, actually.
Right, we want to go out tonight with Brian leading us off with Fabrizio's celebration. Come on, Brian.
Yeah, this is it.
No, I haven't got
Come on, Brian, I want to see it.
anymore.
Come on. Can't escape now. Consider this is your
isn't
induction
gonna
day.
happen.
Come on.
I haven't got a 6-pack anymore. I've got a barrel. It's
You've
not
got
gonna
a
happen.
pack. You've got a pack. Listen, it's been great to meet you. Michael, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
And you, Brian. And you work on that 6-pack.
Nice
We'll get
seeing
you
you,
top off in 2 or
Michael.
3 weeks' time. Thanks, Brian. Good night, Andy. Tim.
Cheers now. Thanks, guys.
Right.